I'm Gail McQuarrie with The Stream here at the 2023 Christians Engaged Conference, and I am so excited for this opportunity to be able to talk to the Honorable Michele Bachmann, who has graciously agreed to answer some questions for us. How does your work intersect with your faith?
Gail, thank you for asking that question. My faith is the central part of my life. When I was 16, I came to Jesus Christ and surrendered my whole life to Him. And so whatever direction the Lord has taken me, that has been the surrender. And so my faith informs everything I do because the Bible speaks to every area of life. And so it's been a thrill to have known the Lord now for 51 years and to apply that relationship and what the Bible says about God into every aspect of my life.
So all the good neighbor, all the money, Israel supplies all of the electricity, all of the water in Gaza. Everything they'd done for them was turned around and used against Israel.
Pause it for 1 second. Just to be clear, they control the water. They control the electricity. They prevent Palestinians in Gaza from building their own water treatment facilities. They prevent Palestinians in Gaza from building their own power plants. But just so you know, it's not just a neighborly thing.
Before October 7th, before this latest indiscriminate bombardment, 9 in 10 people in Gaza did not have access to clean water.
Used to defeat them, used to kill them. And one thing I saw is that whether you live in the north or the south of Israel, whether you're religious or secular, everyone agreed and united. We can no longer embrace this being Mr. Nice Guy to the people who are in Gaza. Because this is over 1,000 years of mothers teaching their children, grow up and kill Jews. Because this is over 1,000 years of mothers teaching their children, grow up and kill Jews.
So the ridiculous place that Israel is in is that they're expected to wage war by Western ethical standards, going up against militant groups that have no such commitment, and that they're held to a very high standard if they don't. And it's so hard if your enemy is willing to put missiles next to hospitals and schools, which is in itself a war crime. Right. It is so hard to take them out without committing a war crime.
No, well, hold on. I've been trying to listen up and learn more about what is a war crime and what isn't.
Okay.
And all this stuff. So the part that's a little frustrating in some of the media coverage of this, and certainly on social media, is I don't think it's wrong to hold Israel to a standard of international law and the laws of war. The problem is they're not being held to that standard. They are being held to some other standard. You mentioned, like, if Hamas puts an army headquarters or a Hamas headquarters in a hospital and Israel bombs that hospital, people will start crying that Israel's committing a war crime for bombing a hospital. They've not committed a war crime because the moment Hamas put weapons there and made it into a base for military operations, it becomes a legitimate target in a war. So Israel's not violating the law by destroying that hospital. Hamas is violating the law by putting its combatants in the hospital. So I'm not advocating for these strategies, but we have to, if you're going to hold Israel accountable to the law, hold them accountable to the law, but you can't have it both ways. Does that make sense?
because this is over 1,000 years of mothers teaching their children, grow up and kill Jews.
Antiochus robs temples for their treasures in order to sell them and to earn revenue for his fractured and weak empire. He also increased taxation on the people. Another thing he did was that he sold the office of the high priest, which was the most sacred office in Judaism, to the highest bidder. And this, of course, heavily angered the Jews. He also, through trying to strictly Hellenize Jerusalem, he tried to turn Jerusalem into a Greek city, including all kinds of things, like Olympic Games. He tried to force Jewish youth to become Greek. So Alexander the Great's Hellenization was much lighter. It was more affirming, whereas Antiochus's Hellenization was much more assimilation. He was trying to rid the world of Judaism and force Jerusalem to become a Greek center. And what happens next is that after he stopped in Rome, he goes down. Remember, Alexandria is the center of the Ptolemaic Empire. Now that Antiochus IV is in charge, he tries to overtake Alexandria, which is now not really being controlled by the Ptolemies as much as it's being controlled by Rome. But he goes down there to try and overtake it, and he is stopped. He stopped shamefully, and what happens is he is forced to retreat back up through Jerusalem, through Israel, and he vents his anger on Jerusalem. And what I want to do is I want to read to you a quote that comes from the Zondervan International Bible Backgrounds Commentary, because this just says it. It just says it so well. So here's what happens. Antiochus was determined to make sure that Palestine was loyal to himself in order to act as a buffer state between himself and the Romans. Considering himself Zeus Epiphanes, he ordered a cultic Hellenization policy in Palestine. Antiochus sent his soldier Apollonius with 22,000 soldiers who came under the pretense of peace, and they attacked Jerusalem on the Sabbath, knowing that Orthodox Jews would not fight, and he killed many people. Women and children were taken as slaves. The city was plundered and burned. Shortly afterward, in 167, Antiochus determined to exterminate the Jewish religion by forbidding the people to live in accordance with their ancestral laws. He forbade the observance of the Sabbath, customary festivals, traditional sacrifices, and the circumcision of children, and he ordered that the copies of the Torah must be destroyed. Idolatrous altars were set up, and the Jews were commanded to offer unclean sacrifices and to eat swine's flesh. Anyone who disobeyed any of these orders was sentenced to death. The climactic, infamous deed, though, was on December 16th, or Kislev, as they would call it, 16th, 167, when the temple in Jerusalem, as well as the Samaritan temple at Mount Gerizim, became the place of worship for the Olympian Zeus, offering swine's flesh on the altar of Zeus, which was erected on the altar of a burnt offering.
And so that's what's taking place. Having assembled this army, he lays siege to Jerusalem in April of 70. So Jerusalem is now for the second time under a complete siege. Of course, the city is heavily overpopulated. All of these people have come from the entire Jewish world in that region, and they're now holed up in Jerusalem. But even at that, they probably could have survived a siege for some years. Jerusalem was heavily provisioned to withstand siege warfare, and so there was at least some hope that they could hang on for a while and just see how this thing shook out. However, as it turns out, Jerusalem fell to Titus only 5 months later.